Adidas has a lot of great boots currently on the market, from the Predator to the Copa Pure to the X Crazy Fast. And while those models are great, one of my favorite boots in the current Adidas lineup is the Copa Gloro. Now you may find that pretty surprising because all of the top end boots that I just mentioned can retail for more than $250, but the Copa Gloros here retail for around $100 or less. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about why I think this might be one of the most overlooked boots currently on the market. And if you're interested in picking up a pair of the Copa Gloros or any of the other boots that we discussed, you can find links to them on sale in the description below. So let's start off with the design. So the Copa Gloros are going to have a full leather upper, and that upper is going to be calf leather instead of kangaroo leather that you may find in the Copa Mundial. Now in recent months, you have seen that some brands are moving away from using leather entirely in their football boots. For example, Puma is no longer using leather in their King model, and Nike has stopped using leather in the famous Tiempo series. Now, there's a variety of reasons that those brands claim to be making the switch away from leather, but for whatever reason, Adidas has decided to hang on and keep making leather football boots. And they haven't really shown any indication that they're going to change that anytime soon, so for people like me that do like playing in leather boots, it's great that Adidas is continuing that tradition. Now, in terms of the specific quality of the leather that's used in the Copa Gloros here, I think it feels great. Now, it's not going to be quite as soft as the kangaroo leather that you're getting in the Copa Mundial, but keep in mind the Copa Mundial is a $180 boot, which is almost twice the price of the Gloro here. And in terms of my personal preference, I actually prefer the design aesthetic that comes through in the Gloro compared to what you get with the Copa Mundial. Starting out with what's maybe most noticeable, and that's going to be the retro fold-over tongue. Now, we did just see the fold-over tongue get brought back with the Predator Elite series that came out a few weeks ago, but the Copa Gloro has actually been doing it for even longer, and it really brings back those classic styles that you saw in the early 2000s. And while the Copa Gloro has been on the market for well over a year now, I had to pick up this model specifically just because I love this colorway. I think something to do with the green accents on the white upper make this boot just look so beautiful. Previously, I think some of the only colorways that you could get were an all black version, which was okay, and there's also a royal blue version. In fact, the white version here with the yellow accents actually reminds me of those classic Tony Cruz boots that Adidas re-released earlier this year. Now, this retro aesthetic isn't necessarily going to be for everyone, but if you do like the style of some of those older classic boots, then I think that these are going to be a no-brainer. Moving on to the sole plate of the Copa Gloros, it is going to be a really simple design, just with about 11 short conical studs. So you're not going to have the same really snappy, aggressive sole plate that's in some of the more premium Adidas models. This one actually is going to have a little bit of bend to it. So you see, if I apply a decent amount of force, I can actually bend it around the midfoot. And then because these are conical studs, I actually think that that's a good thing because while they're going to be slightly less aggressive than those bladed chevrons that you see in other boots, they're going to be great for use on artificial grass. And for me, since I play on artificial grass most of the time, I like having boots with this conical stud pattern. And even though they are going to be conical and not bladed, they're going to offer more than enough traction for most players. And in terms of the overall responsiveness and flex of the sole plate, they're going to be a little bit less snappy, and we'll talk more about how that affects play when we talk about the overall playability of the boots. Then if I just undo the elasticated cover here, you can see that you're going to have a traditional lacing system that's really open and going to be very accommodating for most foot shapes. And one of my favorite features about the design on this lacing system is that you're going to have a lace hole really deep into the ankle here, and that's just going to make it so easy to get a tight fit and great lockdown from these boots. With some cheaper boots, you can sometimes run into an issue of the lacing system just not going deep enough towards the ankle, and you just don't end up getting great lockdown from the boots, but you're not going to have that problem with the Copa Gloro. Now, similar to the Nike Premier 3, Adidas is going to give you the option to remove this fold-over tongue. You can see that dotted line there with the scissors, the scissor logo right there. So essentially, they're saying if you want to remove this fold-over tongue, you can do that. Now, in my opinion, it almost defeats the purpose to buy boots like this and then just cut off the tongue. But without it, I think they would still look pretty good. If I kind of just fold the tongue back into the boot here, they still look pretty clean. So if you want, one thing that I've done in the past is I play with the fold over tongue for a few months, maybe up to 6 months. and then once I've maybe gotten tired of it, then you can remove it. That's something I've done in the past with my Nike Premier 3s. And then since this boot is going to be all white, the elasticated strap here is also white. Now, this is a little bit of an issue because it's going to get really dirty. I played in these once, and the bottom of this elasticated strap already picked up a lot of mud. But since this is going to be underneath the sole plate for most of the time anyway, it's not going to be that much of an issue. Now let's talk about the fit and feel of these boots. So to just get it out of the way, these boots were very, very comfortable, and they're easily some of the most comfortable boots from Adidas that I've tried on within the last 6 months. And that includes the Predator Elite, the Copa Pure 2, as well as the X Crazy Fast. The calf leather feels really soft throughout all parts of the foot, and there's no pressure points whatsoever in any part of the football boot. So throughout the heel, ankle, and the toe box, there's no part of the boot that feels like it's going to be pinching your feet or uncomfortable in any way. And another thing I liked about the fit of the Copa Gloro here is that for some reason, a lot of Adidas models, almost more so than any other brand, they tend to taper really aggressive towards the toe box. So they'll be pretty spacious throughout the midfoot, but then as soon as it gets to the top of the toe box, they get pretty narrow pretty quickly. And that was one issue that I experienced with the Predator Elite that I tried on recently. But with the Copa Gloro here, you actually get pretty consistent width throughout the entire length of the boot. So if you're a wide-footed player, these are definitely boots that I think could accommodate you. But even if you're someone that happens to have feet more on the normal or narrower side, because you have this traditional lacing system, it's going to have a lot of adjustability so you can get it as tight as you want. So I think almost any foot shape should be fine with a boot like this. And since these aren't going to be a one-piece upper football boot, they're also really easy to just slip on and off, which is honestly not really something to brag about, but with how often you see these high-cut knit one-piece upper boots that can be a pain to get on and off, it is pretty nice to have something you can just slip on and off easily. The only extra step in putting on these boots is just going to be undoing that elasticated band around the fold-over tongue, doing the laces, and then putting the fold-over tongue back on. So overall, if I were to rate this maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, which I don't usually do in terms of comfort, I'd say this is around an 8 to an 8.5. They're very comfortable for me. They're about on par with maybe the Nike Premier 3s, but they don't quite have that level that the Copa Mundial or the Adler Horenzo that I reviewed a couple months ago have. Let's move on to the playability. Now, there's an older expression when it comes to sports, and it essentially goes, if you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you play good. And honestly, that really applied when I was wearing these boots, just because I love when I put on a pair of boots that I really like the look of, and whether it's placebo or not, I just think that they're that much more fun to play in when you really enjoy the look of the boots that you're playing in. Now, obviously, as I've said in previous videos, the comfort is always going to be paramount when it comes to your football boots. But, you know, if you have two football boots that are equally comfortable, you're always going to choose the one that looks better. And I think aesthetically, these boots were so great to have on my feet, and they were very comfortable. Now, I did have to relace them up a couple times just to figure out exactly the kind of tightness that I was looking for. And as I mentioned before, these are going to have more adjustability because of that centralized lacing system. So the system that I eventually arrived at was just having them a little bit looser towards the toe box area, and then I tightened them up around the ankle area just to make sure I had enough lockdown and no slipping around the heel. And in terms of comfort on feet while I was dribbling and shooting the ball, I would definitely say that these were a lot more comfortable to play in compared to boots that are in that $60 to $80 price range. So that would include the Copa Pure 2.3 from Adidas, as well as the Nike Tiempo Legend 10 Academy. The Gloro is definitely going to be a cut above those in terms of overall comfort when you have them on feet. Now, I'm not going to lie, I didn't notice a huge difference in terms of having that fold-over tongue giving me a cleaner striking surface, but that being said, I did still appreciate it because it just meant that the laces don't really get in the way quite as much. It's not something that's really going to change your game, but I do think it's a plus. Then regarding the touch on the ball specifically that you get with these boots, I'd say that it delivers kind of that classic touch that you would get from a leather football boot. So a lot of the older leather boots from Adidas, it's pretty similar to the touch that you would get with the Copa Mundial, maybe minus a little bit of softness. But despite the fact that these boots are a little bit heavier than some of the other premium Adidas models, they come in at around 300 grams. They don't feel heavy at all. The touch doesn't feel bulky whatsoever, so the upper is still going to feel pretty thin. And because the quality of the leather is really solid, I think overall it gives you such a natural touch on the ball. Now, when it comes to the sole plate, I didn't notice any issues when it came to traction, but there is one thing I want to note about the general flexibility of the sole plate. These aren't going to be as rigid as the torsion frame that comes in the Copa Pure 2 or as the sole plate that's in the Predator Elite. However, it's going to be a little bit more flexible and relaxed. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just a little bit less intense when you have the boots on feet. For example, I have the Predator Elite here. This sole plate is virtually impossible to bend at the midfoot. It has a little bit of spring in the toe box area, but the Copa Gloro, see, it has a lot more flexion there. And for me personally, I kind of like having a sole plate that's a bit more flexible. You see that in the same way with the Nike Premier 3. I can essentially bend this sole plate in the exact same way. It just means that the boots aren't going to be propelling you into your next step when you're running or sprinting in the way that this boot will. Instead, they're just going to give a little bit more of a relaxed, everyday feeling, probably closer to the flexion that you would get with just a traditional sneaker. Now, personally, I like that feeling, but how rigid you want your sole plate to be is going to come down to a personal preference. All right, next up, let's talk about the competition. Okay, so there are a few different football boots that I can see competing with the Copa Gloro and that you might want to consider if you like the look of this boot. And the first would be the Copa Pure 2 from Adidas. Now, the Copa Pure 2 is a great football boot, but it's going to be a hybrid upper that's not just calf leather, but it's also going to have some synthetic materials in there as well. And it is going to fit more snug than the Copa Gloro here, which is something that you should keep in mind if you have wider feet. And as I mentioned, that torsion frame sole plate that's on the Copa Pure is going to be a lot more aggressive. So it's going to give you a closer fit, it's going to have a snappier sole plate, and if those are features that you're looking for, the Copa Pure 2 could be great for you. But if you're just looking for a soft, comfortable leather upper, I would almost recommend saving the $100 and just going with the Copa Gloro. Now, I think another common comparison that might come with the Copa Gloro is going to be the new Predator Elite that was just released. Now, I have the standard version right here that just has a traditional lacing system, but there is obviously a version of the Predator Elite that has a fold-over tongue, just like the one that you find in the Copa Gloro. So Adidas is clearly, for lack of a better word, pandering to the classic generation, to older football boots when it comes to the new Predator Elite model. They're going with a more classic design. They've ditched the one-piece upper for a more traditional lacing system, and obviously they're including that model with the fold-over tongue. But if all you're really interested in is getting that retro design and a comfortable fit that comes along with it, I think the Copa Gloro is going to be an option that delivers that retro design just at a lower budget. However, the Predator Elite is going to have just some other features that you don't get with the Copa Gloro. For example, you're going to have those strike skin elements on the instep of the foot that give you a lot more traction that you're going to get with the Copa Gloros. And overall, the boots are going to be quite a bit lighter. They're overall, I think, 80 grams lighter when I weighed them, so they will feel a little bit quicker on feet. But for me, when it comes to the value proposition that these two boots offer, it's going to be the Copa Gloro for me, just because I think that at a $100 price point, it offers a lot more than the Predator Elites at $260. And for me, while I do think the Predators look pretty cool, I don't think that they look that much better than the Copa Gloros, and I actually almost prefer the retro aesthetic that I get from the Copas. But maybe the most appropriate comparison that would make sense for the Copa Gloro would be with the Nike Premier 3. Now, I apologize for how these Premiers look because these are boots that I wore for well over a season. They used to be a nice platinum gray color, but since they've gotten really dirty with heavy use over a year or so. But these are great football boots, and they both retail for around that $100 price point. Technically, I think the Premiers are going to be a little bit more expensive. These days, I think they retail for about $110, whereas you can find the Copa Gloros for $10 to $20 less than that. In terms of the specific feel of the two uppers, I will say that just off the bat, the Premiers are going to be a little bit softer when it comes to that kangaroo leather, but the stitching on the Copa Gloros feels a little bit more solid and durable. And it is important to note that with these Premiers that I played in for a while, I did notice some tears in the stitching throughout the side of the boot. But these are both amazing football boots, and I do plan to make a longer separate video going into the differences of these two models to find out which one might be best for you. But at the end of the day, if you're choosing between the Copa Gloro and the Nike Premier 3, you really can't go wrong. These are two great football boots at a very fair price. And speaking of the price, I definitely think it's one of the strongest parts of this football boot, because so often when you buy a premium boot that costs $250 or more, it just doesn't always feel like you're getting that much for your money. And then on the other end of the spectrum, when you buy a cheaper football boot that retails for $50 to $70, like a third tier takedown, it feels almost like you're getting scammed in a different way because they can feel bulky, uncomfortable, the build quality can be really poor. But with this boot, it just really feels like you're getting every single penny's worth and more when it comes to the value for money. So what are my final thoughts? So I just want to reiterate, I think the Copa Gloro is one of the best boots that Adidas is currently making. And if you're shopping for a new pair of boots and your budget is around $100 or less, these are absolutely ones you should consider. But even if your budget happens to be higher, the quality of the Copa Gloros can easily rival that of their more expensive competitors that retail for upwards of $250. So that is going to do it for this video. Please subscribe if you've enjoyed, and if you're interested in supporting the channel and getting some exclusive content, head over to patreon.com as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.